Hi, guys. This is George. I'm delighted to see an article this morning that came across my desk, basically coming to the same conclusions I came to years ago about how it actually works with regard to getting ahead at work. And if you really want to break it down to its simplest stuff, it's that your official metrics on whatever it is that you need to get promoted, you do need to hit those, yes, and you do need to be better than other people, but that won't get you promoted, and that never has gotten anyone promoted, okay? So what actually is important is achieving these sort of secret goals of all of your managers that are relevant to getting you promoted. And so what do I mean by secret goals? What that really is happens to be how the manager themselves see themselves gaining traction in the organization and their own advancement. Your own advancement is only going to happen if they can fit it in their own head as being a part of their own advancement.
Right, and this kind of goes into some of the secrets that a lot of people have talked about, like, say, Rick Rule regarding how to get wealthy, that sort of thing. Where one of the things that you can do to get wealthy is make other wealthy people wealthier.
Yeah,
You know, just butter their bread enough, and you get some of the butter too.
Yeah, it's not exactly a quid pro quo. It's just everybody wants to feel like they're in a sort of we're both raising each other up sort of relationship, because that is the most positive mental vision any person can have of themselves, is that we're all helping each other.
Yeah, it's a win-win synergy, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And, that is sometimes hard to figure out what it takes to get there, especially given not all of your managers are necessarily going to be, shall we say, acting in the best of faith with regard to corporate goals and your performance metrics and things like that. So a lot of times when you find out their vision of themselves and what they see getting them promoted might have literally nothing whatsoever to do with the actual job. And that is where things usually get hairy and a little bit hinky. Okay, because then it's gonna be something like, oh, you helped me dunk on this other VP by, say, making it clear that their project was going to fail, or you assisted me in making the guy I replaced look like a chimp by sabotaging some of their projects simply through not maintaining them, things like that.
Or by making some sort of other end run around it to where we didn't need that project anymore. Sometimes that can be a good thing, sometimes that can be a bad thing. It depends on how exactly the opportunity presents itself, whether it actually is helpful or not.
Well, in general, those sorts of ancillary goals that tend to be Machiavellian are not particularly productive towards the corporate goals, but they are very good at advancing your actual position in the organization relative to others. That's the thing, is that if you really want to do the productive route to advancing yourself as both a manager and as an employee, that's actually the toughest row to hoe, because as we all know, it's a lot easier to tear others down and then
build each other up.
Yeah, and that's the big show, is that it's always going to be some mix of that. You want the manager to feel like you're part of the building people up, because they're going to have that fiction inside of their mind that that's how their role in the company is, and that's what they're doing, even if what they are actually in fact doing, if you look at it from a like 10,000 foot perspective, is just tearing down others to get ahead.
Well, or if you take, say, the 3 years out perspective, which that article that I had showed there for a few moments talks about, where, say, an opportunistic project manager, that sort of thing, they can just attach themselves to a project that 3 years out is where you're only going to see any sort of benefit or loss or something like that.
And those are always losers.
And yes. Yeah. And so, like, we've seen that before, where promising, if, somewhat flawed projects that are fulfilling an actual need in an organization,
but they're too ambitious,
are replaced by high, and I mean high cost alternatives, just so that they could no longer justify having one guy that was maintaining that and paying their salary just to basically maintain that. Instead, they replace it with a turnkey solution that winds up getting inherited by a systems administration
And they
crew.
essentially still have the same crew of people just maintaining this stuff.
Well, or they, in fact, at the end, have more people dedicated to maintaining this ultimately and spent a whole bunch of money when they didn't need to in the first place.
But that's a very common sort of organizational pathology that I think we've gone over here a couple of times. It's sort of that the highest cost solution tends to be the thing that wins because, number one, it's not your direct reports to blame. It's the vendor's fault if it doesn't work, right? And the other half of that is that it's just people are more willing to spend on those things that are arm's length than things that are squishy and very like I am absorbing you into my digestive tract like a real employee.
Right, or if it's something that's a product that's made by an employee, even if it's only consumed internally, they're going to dislike that because that means that person is irreplaceable in many ways. And a lot of organizations really, really hate having employees that they can't basically just be like, well, if he gets shot tomorrow, I can just replace him. One dies, get another. That makes a lot of managers very uncomfortable when you have those types of people.
But the fact is, if they were rational, they would understand that your organization cannot and will not work if you aren't staffed at the highest levels by precisely those people that are if you, for example, went and just chopped off the heads of the top 10 performers in any corporation, they would massively suffer. That's just how it works. Okay. Any organization, sales, development, they're all that way. I would say worrying about the bus factor is basically fear of loss mindset.
Yeah. It's a scarcity mentality where you're not necessarily thinking that employees are scarce, which is kind of the wrong way to look at it, but you're thinking that the opportunities that are given by having top performers are scarce, basically.
No, and neither of those is true. I mean, look, the fact is that if you've got this problem of something that you don't like, someone having too much influence there, that's really what it gets down to, is that somebody who's not a manager has too much influence. Well, maybe the question is, how did they acquire this influence in the first place? And was that good or bad? If it's good, then maybe you should just make it official.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they've taken types of leadership roles in the company, whether it's from a technical standpoint or something like that. Leaders that lead from the front are actually extremely effective organizationally and very popular with their subordinates. So if you have a guy that's extremely effective, even if they're not necessarily that interested in being a manager or something like that, thrusting that sort of responsibility on them
usually works quite well.
Works pretty well.
Yeah, because the thing is, same things that make you productive as an employee usually make you quite productive when it comes to leadership. Okay, especially if you don't ever leave the domain dependent that you're in, because that's the thing. If you just thrust them into something that's totally outside of their comfort zone and their domain, it's just not going to work, because most people their dominance and their leadership skills are entirely domain dependent. All right, we got our little doggy here. Had to get a scratch. So, anyways, so the whole 3-year thing actually brings to mind a question that actually I did when I was talking to a manager once. They did the classic old canard of, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I said, I think the question that is rather more important is where you see yourself in 5 years. Because the fact is, every manager that you're with, essentially you are riding on their back, okay? And if they don't see their success as, well, I built up all of my direct reports into superpowers, and my division is much better than every other division in the company, then this guy is not the guy you want to hitch your wagon to. That's just a fact, okay? And it's good to have ambition in a manager and things like that. And that will make it very straightforward for you to understand. And it's an entry point into the conversation as to, look, let's actually get down to what you really want, not this stuff that's in your whatever binder of things that you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah. Because people that are opportunistic tend to be the ones that seize the opportunity, quite frankly, and it's easy to know why, because they showed up, so to speak. But this is not necessarily a thing that's bad in and of itself. Where it goes bad is when nobody is checking them, so to speak. There's nobody that's either in senior management or in other layers of management that are above them that are aware of what's going on. They're not aware that despite it all, he's an opportunist at heart kind of thing. Because ultimately, the opportunist is also going to be a pragmatist. If it means that their interests would be served by not serving the company first, they'll serve it.
Yeah, and that's really the thing that you just have to keep your eye on is that principal agent problem, right?
Yeah, and if you line things up, if you manipulate them as well, which for a lot of people who are higher management that are not those opportunistic types, it seems really skeevy to be Machiavellian in that way, to try to make your profit align with their principle and that
But you
sort of
have
thing.
to do that with your incentives. You have to be Machiavellian about that. There is no actual other way to make it work.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I really have to say on this subject with regard to getting promoted and things like that is there's the opposite side of this coin. Okay, is uh, it's essentially the same reason you get fired when you ever get fired. Okay, because
Well, unless it's a low performing job, but we're talking mostly developers here. We're talking skilled labor.
yeah,
And skilled labor getting fired is usually not going to be for performance reasons, because if they're that skilled, if they're that sort of thing, they got that way for a reason. They got that way because they're productive, because they actually, give a crap about work. They usually are proud of their work,
yeah,
that sort of thing.
yeah, and it's very rare for you to see any successful long-term manager in these higher levels of artisanal and crafts and engineering and things like that to actually continue being managers if they have sort of a hair trigger, which is very common in people who manage lower level employees where they're very replaceable, or the skill level is just not high.
Yeah.
The fact is, anybody with high skill level, especially if it's knowledge work, they're going to have them some opinions, man. They're going to have a lot of opinions on a lot of stuff, and people will get rustled because that's what opinions do, and they will also have opinions about you as a manager. Okay.
Yeah.
They will have opinions about the direction of the organization. They will have opinions about all these things.
Well, because as well, if it's a development organization, especially, and you're talking developers that you're managing, they're going to have some opinions on how to run a development organization, because
Half of them have
half
done
of
that.
them have done that.
Yeah.
Especially your old heads.
Yeah, they were all software entrepreneurs earlier in their life.
Yeah, and a lot of the ones that are really old heads, they've ran whatever their biz is. They either ran it into the ground, they didn't succeed, they did succeed. Now they're just looking for a job to do something as kind of almost a hobby, basically.
There's lots of reasons people go back, but that's not necessarily important. The important thing is that if you want to retain top talent, you have to understand that these sort of escalation strategies that are very common with regard to lower level employees, which is essentially just try and scare them straight, that just pisses them off and makes them intransigent. You can't be the cop, okay?
Yeah.
With these people, because they're just going to tell you to FO, okay? They're just not going to deal with it.
Well, it's just like when dealing with any other sort of high value individual. If you're just going to walk in there all full of piss and vinegar and basically be like, well, it's my way or the highway, how do you think that's going to go if you're meeting with a CEO for the first time? How do you think that's going to go if it was, you're a dude and you're meeting a really hot babe, that sort of thing?
No, they're going to laugh at you. Yeah, that's what they're going to do.
They're going to tell you to basically piss off.
Yeah.
Whether they're polite about it is more about their own personality, but generally any high value individual, depending on the context, you're gonna win more points by being nuanced with your approach instead of being very direct and confrontational.
Yeah, generally you're going to need to be doing things that are just trying to de-escalate the situation. That's all you really have to do, because most of these problems, especially with people who've been around the block, they know that most problems simply go away with time, okay? And that most of these sort of little crises, especially personality crises, they cool off after a week or so tops, and people can usually get right back to work, because the thing is, emotional outrage is very, very hard to keep stoking unless someone keeps stoking it, okay?
Right.
And usually the fact is, people who are at this high level, they don't stoke it because they don't care. Okay?
Yeah,
they're not interested in that sort of thing. They just want to do work, and it's just these little things that come up that stop things from working.
Yeah, and sure, someone that's been in the industry for a while, or even not, they may unintentionally do something that pisses somebody off, that causes some sort of conflict. But escalating it as the first move is almost never the right move there, because especially if they have the type of attitude where they're highly skilled, that sort of thing. Again, it's just going to piss them off.
Well,
You're going to make it to where the behavior that you want out of them, you're actually less likely to get it from them.
well,
And they are going to become more likely to be fired because you're basically causing them to be stubborn.
oh yeah, and it's not just that because these people have been around the block and they have skills and they have experience. They're also going to be suspicious that the reason you are escalating is not because you're just a bonehead, who thinks he's a cop. Uh, it might be because it's a power game. Okay, and
Right.
whenever an employee senses that it's a power game, most of them that's when they pretty much lose their mind. Okay, because they realize there's nothing I can do.
Oh yeah.
If it's a
Then
power game, and I've already got my leg in this bear trap, there's not a lot I can do other than go over their head. And the fact is, if I do that, it's more than likely to be as bad or worse of an outcome than if I'd done nothing.
right at that point, most people would rather just take the L and move on because there's so many better opportunities out there than having to deal with a shit situation like that.
Yeah, and so that's probably the best advice we have is, if there's any kind of serious conflict with management, and they're going to always drop clues because nobody is actually good about sort of hiding any kind of power game. They're always going to drop little clues that they're suspicious about you and where you fit in their advancement plan, shall we say. And if it's clear that they see you as a risk or a threat, which they'll drop little hints here and there, that's when you need to start looking for extra opportunities. So, hope y'all guys enjoyed the cast. Feel free to like and subscribe and go for a contract with Troglodyne if you got the time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We're always looking for new opportunities, just like we're talking about here. You got to keep courting them. You got to keep your options open because that's how you as a developer is going to maximize your own personal freedom.
Yep.
Have a good night, guys.
See you later.